They say family is supposed to be your rock, your safe harbor in any storm. Mine was more like a leaking raft, quick to toss overboard anyone who became inconvenient. My name is Isabella. I'm 45 now. This story, the one that redefined my understanding of loyalty and self-worth, began 10 years ago, not with a bang, but with a deafening silence in the echoing expanse of St. Michael's Church. It was the day of my divorce finalization. Not in the courtroom. That was a sterile, procedural affair. This was the social fallout, the public shaming, orchestrated subtly by my ex-husband, David, and tacitly endorsed by my own blood. David, a pillar of our small, insular community, a successful businessman with a carefully cultivated image of righteousness, had painted me as the unstable, unreasonable party. The truth, his serial infidelities, his emotional cruelty, was a messy, inconvenient narrative no one wanted to hear, least of all my parents and my older sister, Caroline. That Sunday, 3 days after the papers were signed, I walked into church alone. Our family always sat in the third pew on the right. It was practically reserved. As I approached, I saw them. My mother, Eleonora, her face a mask of strained piety. My father, Arthur, looking stern and uncomfortable. And Caroline, fussing with her perfectly coiffed hair, pointedly ignoring my approach. There was an empty space beside Caroline where I usually sat, but as I moved to take it, Caroline shifted, placing her large handbag squarely on the seat. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting second, cold and dismissive, before she turned her attention back to the altar. My mother gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. My father simply stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. The message was clear. I was no longer welcome. I was tainted, the divorced daughter, an embarrassment to their pristine family image. The pew, a symbol of our family unity, now had a physical barrier against me. My cheeks burned, the whispers from the surrounding pews, the curious, pitying glances, they felt like tiny needles. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, exposed and utterly alone. The shame was a suffocating cloak. David, from his seat across the aisle with his new, much younger friend, watched with a look of quiet triumph. He had not only ended our marriage, he had successfully excommunicated me from my own family. With a dignity I didn't feel, I turned and walked to the very back of the church, finding a solitary seat in the last pew, usually reserved for latecomers or visitors. The sermon about forgiveness and compassion that day felt like a cruel joke. After the service, I tried to approach my parents in the churchyard. Mother? Father? Eleonora turned her back, engaging in an animated conversation with Mrs. Henderson about the upcoming bake sale. Arthur gave me a curt nod, and then busied himself inspecting a rose bush. Caroline swept past me without a word, linking arms with a sympathetic-looking friend. The abandonment was complete, brutal, public. That night, alone in the small apartment I'd managed to rent, the silence was a crushing weight. The betrayal by my husband was one wound. The betrayal by my family was another deeper, more agonizing cut. They had chosen sides, and they hadn't chosen me. The foundation of my life had crumbled, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty and profound grief. I didn't know then that this agonizing ending was the brutal beginning of my true independence. The weeks and months following that Sunday at St. Michael's were a period of profound desolation. The social ostracization in our small town was palpable. Invitations dried up. Old friends became distant, their conversations strained and awkward. My attempts to connect with my parents or Caroline were met with polite but firm rebuffs, unanswered calls, curt email replies, doors that remained closed. David, meanwhile, seamlessly integrated his new partner into the community, his social standing seemingly untouched, even enhanced by his portrayal as the stoic victim of a difficult marriage. The pattern of my family's behavior, I realized with painful clarity, had always been there, lurking beneath a veneer of middle-class respectability. Image was paramount. My father, Arthur, was a man obsessed with reputation, with what people would think. My mother, Eleonora, was his loyal lieutenant in this campaign for social acceptance, her own anxieties and insecurities manifesting as a rigid adherence to convention. Caroline, my older sister, had always been the golden child, effortlessly charming, marrying well, producing perfect grandchildren. I, the quieter, more introspective one, the one who had married David for love, not status, had had always been a slight disappointment, an outlier in their carefully constructed narrative of family perfection. My divorce, particularly the messy, unspoken reasons behind it, was an intolerable stain on their public image. It was easier to excise me than to deal with the uncomfortable truth. I had no choice but to leave. The town felt like a cage, every familiar street corner a reminder of my isolation. I sold what little I had, packed my car, and drove away, heading towards a larger, anonymous city where I knew no one. The first year was a struggle for survival. I found a job as a receptionist in a busy law firm, the pay barely enough to cover rent on a tiny studio apartment in a less than desirable neighborhood. Loneliness was a constant ache. There were many nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made a mistake, if I should have just endured the charade of my marriage, the coldness of my family, for the sake of belonging somewhere, to someone. But with each passing day, a small, stubborn resolve grew within me. I would not be broken. I would not let their judgment define me. I enrolled in evening classes, pursuing a long-dormant interest in paralegal studies. I was meticulous, dedicated, and I discovered I had a keen analytical mind. Slowly, things began to change. I excelled in my studies. I was promoted at the law firm, moving from receptionist to paralegal assistant, then to a full paralegal role. I found a mentor in one of the senior partners, a sharp, compassionate woman named Ms. Albright, who saw my potential and encouraged me. Years passed. 10 years. I didn't just survive. I thrived. I had become a highly respected senior paralegal, specializing in complex litigation. I had bought my own small condominium in a pleasant, quiet neighborhood. I had a small circle of genuine friends, people who valued me for who I was, not for my family connections or social standing. I was financially independent, emotionally resilient, and content in my own skin. The pain of my family's abandonment had never entirely disappeared. It was a scar, a reminder of a deep wound, but it no longer controlled me. It had, instead, fueled a quiet determination to build a life based on my own values: integrity, compassion, and an unshakable belief in my own worth. I hadn't sought news of my family, and they had certainly never sought news of me. The silence between us was a vast, unbridgeable chasm. I had made my peace with it, or so I thought. The Judgment Day, I sometimes darkly mused about, felt like a distant, almost mythical concept, something that would happen in another lifetime. I never imagined it would arrive in the form of a desperate, unexpected plea. Life had settled into a comfortable, if solitary, rhythm. My work as a senior paralegal at Albright and Finch was demanding but fulfilling. I had carved out a niche for myself, respected by my colleagues, valued by our clients. The raw ache of my family's abandonment had long since dulled into a scar, a faint silvery line on my soul that occasionally twinged, but no longer dictated my emotional weather. I rarely thought of them. Arthur, Eleonora, Caroline. They were ghosts from another life. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, as I was meticulously reviewing discovery documents for a complex corporate fraud case, my direct office line buzzed. It was an unknown number, with the area code of my old hometown. My heart gave an involuntary, uncomfortable lurch. I almost let it go to voicemail. Old habits, old hurts, die hard. But something, a flicker of morbid curiosity perhaps, made me pick it up. Isabella Rossi speaking, a hesitant, frail voice on the other end, a voice I hadn't heard in a decade, yet one that was instantly, chillingly familiar. Isabella? My dear, is that truly you? My mother, Eleonora. The pen slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the polished surface of my desk. The meticulously organized documents blurred. For a moment I couldn't breathe. 10 years of silence, 10 years of being a non-entity, and now this. Yes, Mother, I said, my voice remarkably calm, a testament to the composure I had painstakingly cultivated. It's me. Oh, Isabella, thank heavens. Her voice was thin, reedy, laced with a desperation that was entirely new. The imperious, judgmental tone I remembered was gone, replaced by something fragile, almost broken. We need you, Isabella. We need your help. Terribly. We need you. The words, so long absent from my life where they were concerned, now sounded alien, almost grotesque. Help? I echoed, my voice carefully neutral. What kind of help? Her words came out in a rush, a torrent of fear and panic. It seemed Caroline's husband, Richard, the perfect son-in-law, had been involved in a series of highly questionable real estate deals. He had apparently leveraged the family assets, my parents' home, Caroline's own property, even some funds my father had naively invested with him, in a complex scheme that had now spectacularly imploded. They were facing financial ruin, lawsuits, the loss of everything. Richard had, it seemed, disappeared, leaving Caroline and my parents to face the fallout. The lawyers, they say we could lose the house, Isabella. Everything Arthur worked for. Caroline is a wreck. Your father, he's not well. The stress. Eleonora was sobbing now, a messy, uncontrolled sound that bore no resemblance to her usual carefully managed emotions. I listened in silence, a strange, cold detachment settling over me. This wasn't just financial trouble. This was a public disgrace, the very thing they had always feared, the very thing they had sacrificed me to avoid. And now, in their hour of desperate need, they were turning to me. The daughter they had cast out, the one who had built a career navigating the very legal complexities that now threatened to engulf them. The irony was almost biblical in its proportions. "Why are you calling me mother?" I asked, my voice still quiet, devoid of accusation, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "You haven't spoken to me in 10 years. Oh, Isabella, don't. Please," she begged. "We were wrong. I was wrong. We know that now. But you're so clever with these legal things. We heard you're very successful. Ms. Albright, your boss. She's very well respected. We thought, maybe you could help us, advise us, tell us what to do." So they had heard of my success. Interesting. Likely through the small-town grapevine that had once spread whispers of my shame. A plan began to form in my mind. Not a plan for revenge in the petty sense, but for a reckoning, a final accounting. They had judged me, abandoned me, left me to fend for myself. Now they were coming to me, their fate, it seemed, resting in my hands. "I see," I said slowly. "You want my professional advice?" "Yes. Oh yes, Isabella. Anything. We'll pay you, of course, whatever your fee." "There will be no fee, Mother," I said, a strange calmness descending upon me. "But if you want my help, you will all come to my office. You, Father, and Caroline. Next Monday, at 10 a.m., we will discuss this as a family." The use of the word family felt like a deliberate, precise incision. Eleonora agreed immediately, profusely, gratitude and desperation warring in her voice. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring out at the city skyline. The Judgment Day I had once vaguely imagined was no longer a mythical concept. It had a date and a time, and I, Isabella Rossi, the discarded daughter, would be presiding. They thought they were coming for legal advice. They had no idea they were coming to face the full, unvarnished truth of their own making, a truth I had carried silently for a decade. The scales were about to be balanced. The week leading up to their appointment was a strange one. I felt a detached, almost clinical focus. I instructed my assistant to book the largest conference room, the one with the imposing mahogany table and the panoramic city views. I didn't delve into the specifics of their case. I didn't need to. My preparation was internal, a revisiting of 10 years of silence, of rebuilding, of quiet dignity forged in the crucible of their abandonment. Monday morning arrived, crisp and clear. I dressed in a sharply tailored navy suit, a quiet statement of professional authority. At precisely 10 a.m., my assistant buzzed. "Ms. Rossi, your family is here." The slight hesitation in her voice was telling. I walked into the conference room. They were already seated, looking small and out of place against the backdrop of corporate power. My father, Arthur, looked frail, aged beyond his years, his eyes darting nervously around the room. My mother, Eleonora, was pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief in her lap. Caroline sat stiffly, her usually immaculate appearance somewhat disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. The arrogance I remembered was gone, replaced by a brittle anxiety. "Mother, Father, Caroline," I greeted them, my voice even, professional. I took my seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming." Eleonora started to speak, a rush of tearful explanations and pleas, but I held up a hand. "Before we discuss your current situation," I said, my gaze sweeping over each of them, "there is something else we need to address. 10 years of something else. A silence fell, thick and uncomfortable. They looked at each other, then back at me, a dawning unease in their eyes. This wasn't going the way they had expected. 10 years ago, I continued, my voice calm but unwavering. After my divorce, you collectively made a decision. You chose to exclude me, to abandon me, to prioritize appearances and a carefully constructed family image over your own daughter, your own sister. You left me to face the fallout of a painful marriage and a public shaming, entirely alone. My father started to protest. Isabella, it wasn't like that. Wasn't it, Father? I met his gaze directly. Do you remember the church pew? Do you remember the unanswered calls? The closed doors? Do you remember the silence? He flinched, looking down at the table. Eleonora was openly weeping now. Caroline stared at me, a mixture of resentment and dawning comprehension on her face. I spent years rebuilding my life, I went on, my voice still quiet, yet carrying the weight of every lonely night, every struggle. I built a career, a home, a sense of self, with no help from any of you. I learned to rely on myself, because you taught me, in the most brutal way possible, that I could not rely on you. I paused, letting my words sink in. The air in the room was charged, heavy. Now, after a decade of that silence, you come to me, not for reconciliation, not to acknowledge the pain you caused, but because you are in trouble, because you need something. You need my expertise, the very expertise I gained in the solitary world you consigned me to. Eleonora choked out, "We're sorry, Isabella. So sorry. We made a terrible mistake. Are you sorry for what you did?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. "Or are you sorry because you now find yourselves in a desperate situation and believe I am your only hope?" The question hung there, unanswered. Their faces were a study in discomfort and dawning shame. "The truth is," I continued, "your current predicament is, in many ways, a direct consequence of the values you have always prioritized. Image over substance, convenience over loyalty, judgment over compassion. Richard, Caroline's husband, thrived in that environment, an environment you all cultivated. He preyed on your desire for easy wealth and social standing." Caroline finally spoke, her voice trembling. "What are you saying, Isabella?" "I am saying," I replied, "that the judgment day you now face is not one I have orchestrated, but one you have collectively brought upon yourselves. The legal advice you seek? There are many competent lawyers in this city who can assist you. I will even provide you with a list of reputable firms." I slid a piece of paper across the table with 3 names on it. "But I stated, my voice clear and final, "will not be one of them. I will not use my skills, my hard-won expertise, to extricate you from the consequences of your own choices, your own betrayals." A stunned silence. Eleonora gasped. Arthur looked utterly defeated. Caroline stared at me, her mouth agape. This was the last thing they expected. They had anticipated tears, perhaps recriminations, followed by my reluctant agreement to help. They had not anticipated this calm, unshakable refusal. "You came here seeking a legal savior," I said, standing up. "But what you needed first was to confront the truth of your actions towards me. Perhaps this situation will finally allow you to do that." I walked to the door. "My assistant will validate your parking." As I left them there, amidst the silent testament of my success and their dawning comprehension, I didn't feel triumph or even anger. I felt a profound, quiet release. The scales had been balanced, not by an act of vengeance, but by an act of truth, an act of self-respect. My judgment had been delivered. They would have to face their crisis without me, forced to rely on the very world that valued the superficialities they had always cherished. And perhaps, in that struggle, they might finally understand the true cost of what they had thrown away 10 years prior. My liberation was complete, not because they were suffering, but because I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my power, on my own terms, in my own way. The final verdict was my own freedom,